that we've been in the technology push side of the arena for the last few speeches. We're going to come back to the market pull. And our first speaker on this subject is Rob Pearlman, who is Director of Communications for Space Adventures Limited. And he's going to tell you about Space Adventures. Rob is also the Director of Online Programs for NSS and is a webmaster of great renown. Space Adventures is a cool organization that is working, as I said, kind of at the other end. I'm not aware of any hardware they're developing, but I know that they're very active in the emerging space tourism arena. So let's say hello to Rob and look forward to his presentation.
Let's see. Well, I first have to apologize. I missed my flight out here, and my presentation, or at least my original presentation intended for this, is sitting back at Dulles Airport in D.C. But luckily there's FedEx, and we got another presentation sent over. But Space Adventures, and let me just mix it together. Space Adventures was founded as the Space Travel Company. And to qualify that a little bit, straighten that down. What that means is that what our founders recognized, and I'll introduce you to them a little bit as I go on, what we sort of recognized was space tourism doesn't need to be something that's in the future. It's something here today. It's a idea that space tourism is not only going to space, it's going to space places here on Earth and experiencing space here on Earth, which is possible. And to show that, we were founded by a combination of the travel industry and space experts to create Space Adventures. And we came up with this idea that space tourism, and we're going to drop that word for a little while, going to space and going to space-related places, it was something that was obtainable and was wanted now. One of the common themes among all space adventures is that, and all of our employees, is that we all want to go. We all want to be astronauts. We all want to see the space launches. We all want to. We're all members of the National Space Society. We're all very supportive of the idea of going, but we couldn't wait, or we weren't eligible for the NASA astronaut program, and we wanted to see what we could do ourselves to fulfill dreams. And so we combined the industry, the travel and tourism industry, with the space experts in both former astronauts and people who studied life sciences, and we looked at what was available, and we created Space Adventures. At the heart of Space Adventures is that we want to go. We want to be the ones who take people as soon as possible to space as commercial space tourists. Take you up to 62 miles, and as you heard earlier, if you were here earlier today, from Peter Diamandis, the X Prize was something of an impetus for that to occur. The idea that we could go up to 62 miles and back down was something that really sponsored Space Adventures to come into existence. But our partners include, and our founders, include Mike McDowell, who you see there standing on top of Mount Everest. He leads Quark Expeditions. He founded Quark Expeditions. It's the largest operator of North Pole trips. He does that via Russian nuclear vehicles, ships, and actually Ron Jones, who just left, was one of the passengers aboard one of those ships back in late last year. And Gloria Bohan, who runs Omega World Travel, which is a $500 million privately owned travel agency. And they came together, and Mike's the type of person that he's been to the top of Mount Everest, he's been to both poles, he's been to the bottom of the ocean, he's seen the Titanic. And a reporter came up to him one day and said, you know, you've been everywhere on Earth. I guess the only place that's not obtainable is space. And he sat there for a moment, he went, well, I don't know about that. Come back to me in 5 years. And 5 years later, he had found Space Adventures. And so he brought together not only the travel industry, but he brought together a group of astronauts who all had similar ideas. Top there being Buzz Aldrin, as you just heard, a very strong supporter of the space tourism idea, and he came on board with Owen Garriott, whose son now is one of our #1 customers. His son wants to be the first person to, the first sibling of an astronaut to fly in space. Well, not sibling, first descendant of an astronaut to fly in space. Kathy Thornton, Captain Hoop Gibson, Charlie Walker, Norm Taggart, and Byron Lichtenberg, and they all share the same idea that they've seen something that they need to share with others. It's one thing to be able to put a video up on the screen and say, look, this is where I went, but all of them hold deep in their heart that it's much better if they could take you along with them. And they want to, and what they've agreed is that they want to lead the tours to space. So the question is, how real is this, and what can you do today? Well, we came up with a steps to space idea. It was 4 steps that would take you to experience space, 3 of which being available right now today, and the 4th being available within 2 to 3 years. The first being terrestrial tours. This is going to space-related areas on Earth, or under the sea, or in the air, that give you some experience of what spaceflight's like. And we'll show you a little bit about what those programs include. And zero-gravity flights. This is really topical here in Houston. It's basically the quote-unquote vomit comet, if you've heard that term, but it's parabolic flights that take you up to about 35,000 feet and drop you to 25,000 feet. We'll show you a little bit about that. Then Journey to the Edge of Space, which could take you to the literal edge of space, the highest you can go in a jet, and see the curvature of the Earth. And then suborbital space flights. And as I said earlier, this is the suborbital space flights. Part of it was at the heart of what Space Adventures was founded for, but it was what also unifies all these, because it's basically a long-term training program, how you could become an astronaut yourself. And the 3 of the 4 do exist today, and so let me show you a little bit about what is available. Terrestrial tours was our idea that there were programs here on Earth that were available and could definitely be exciting to people around the Earth. Rocket scientist training. This is basically model rocketry, touring the country and showing kids parent-child weekends, how to put together a rocket, how a rocket works, and launching it. Mysteries of the universe. Now let me qualify, this is an old view graph, and it's not the presentation that I would have loved to share with you, but so some of this has changed a little bit, but Mysteries of the Universe is exploring the Earth for what we don't know about in the solar system, and in a few minutes I'll show you what that's about. NASA Kennedy Space Center, well that sort of evolved into Experience a Space Launch, and might as well just go over to that one. It's our 3-day program that takes you into Kennedy Space Center with VIP access. And you go with a former NASA astronaut, one of the ones you saw before, and they take you around the Cape. And this has been one of our most popular programs to date. There's nothing that really compares to seeing a launch in person. And what we found when we put this program together was that if you can't go yourself, seeing the launch is the next best thing. But it's even better when an astronaut stays by you and tells you all about how he flew on the shuttle, and really takes you through the whole launch in person. And also included in this program, like I mentioned before, the rocket scientist training. It's a 2 to 3 day program. We do tour the country with this. We both use high-powered rocketry and Estes model kits, depending on the age group that we have in attendance. We work with both EEE and the National Association of Rocketry. And even though it says down there groups of 12 to 16, we've actually done programs much larger than that. And Mysteries of the Universe was a slightly different program. This takes you around the Earth to see what not only the skies, but elsewhere across the Earth, to see where we can see what's happening in the solar system, or how the solar system was founded here on Earth. For instance, going out to Hawaii to see the lava flows out at Kilauea, or going out to Arizona to see Meteor Crater, Barringer Meteor Crater, and learning about impacts and the real truth behind Armageddon and Deep Impact, or going out to Puerto Rico and seeing the Arecibo telescope and learning about radio astronomy. And so these are programs that are operational now and are geared at just about anybody, any age group, any person, anywhere around the world. And we've been operating these for a bit over a year now, and we now have 17 programs in place. And before I go on, we are about to debut a couple of other programs that we haven't made public yet, and I want to share one of them with you. We are, as you may have heard, a couple of years ago they discovered that underneath the ocean, deep in the ocean, there was these deep sea vents where life was found that shouldn't have existed. And this is being linked to where on Europa we know there's it's covered in ice, but underneath there could be these same deep sea vents and life could exist there. And so we are going to take the first commercial passengers, tourists, down to these vents to see the life that's living down there with experts to explain what life on Europa might be like and simulate a Europa-type expedition. But I call these programs, they're exciting and there's a lot of excitement with them, but it really doesn't start until you leave the ground. And that's where our next step comes in. The next step to space is our zero-gravity flights. We operate these out of Russia today. They are on an Ilyushin 76 MDK, which is a little larger than a 727 or 737. I apologize, I had great video of this, and someone in Dulles Airport is enjoying this immensely. This is a program where you go to Russia, there is no training necessary. Health-wise, as long as you can ride a commercial air flight, and in theory you can ride a roller coaster, you don't need to have ridden a roller coaster, but in theory you can fly on this. We take you up about 35,000 feet, and so you have a flight profile here, and drop you to 25,000 feet in 30 seconds. And as you drop, you get weightlessness, and you get to float around inside of the vehicle. Now, a lot of people, and I mentioned earlier, the name of the vehicle here in NASA that they use to train the astronauts, the KC-135, has been affectionately known by the astronauts for years as the Vomit Comet. And I'm not going to explain why, it should be pretty obvious. But they also found out that after about 1 hour, that's when most people got sick. So these flights are limited to an hour, and we take passengers up. And we've operated now 6 or 7 flights with about 12 to 13 people aboard each one, and we've only had one person get sick. And next week we're taking a group of 15 people out to Russia to fly this. I'm going to be one of the ones who's going on this first flight. I'll tell you that figure about people getting sick will grow by at least one.
Why did you have to go all the way to Russia? Why can't you just get a KC-135 and fly it here?
Very good question, and it leads to what we're going to be bringing to the United States later this year. Part of it was no one had ever proposed doing this type of flight in the United States, so we had to work with the FAA to get the clearance to fly commercial passengers on a vehicle like this. We are looking at bringing a 737, touring the country with a 737 that's been modified to bring it to all the national airports in the country and just letting you experience as you go. Russia right now is immediately available. They have a vehicle that was used, the same vehicle that was used to train all the cosmonauts is the one that we fly on. In fact, there are times where part of the flight is taken up by cosmonaut crews who are training for their missions. And we also have operated outside of out of France. There's a vehicle that's available there, and also, but the United States should be coming later this year, and it's a program that we hope that will be of immense popularity. But while we're over in Russia, we also take you over to Star City, and you get to tour the Russian equivalent of Cape Canaveral. We also provide flights over to Baikonur to see the actual launch facilities. But this is a program that is available today, and we found is as close. Well, the astronauts say this is as close that you can get to weightlessness in space as you can on Earth. It's not comparable to neutral buoyancy training, which is another program we do in terrestrial tours. But the third step, this gives you the experience of weightlessness. The other experience that spaceflight includes is the actual sight of space, and that's what this next step provides. This is also out of Russia. It's aboard a MiG-25 Foxbat to 80,000 feet. And this one has a very valid reason that it's out of Russia. In the United States, it's against the law to fly at supersonic speeds because of noise pollution. And in Russia, there's plenty of open areas where they can fly at supersonic. And you wouldn't want to get to 80,000 feet not flying supersonic because it would take you forever. But in fact, the MiG-25 is one of the safest jet fighters in the world. There's a story that is populated in Russia out in Zukovsky Air Base. A MiG-21 took off from Zukovsky Air Base about 20 years ago with a pilot on board. He thought he had an engine failure and ejected. There was no engine failure. It was just a bad light on the board. And the plane continued unpiloted all the way to Poland when it ran out of gas and crashed on someone's house. And we've got a picture of this MiG-21 sitting on top of some guy's house. Poor guy. But the thing operated quite safely by itself.
21 or
21. 25 takes you up to 80,000 feet, and at that height you can see the curvature of the Earth and the blackness of space. This is an actual picture out the window at that height. And our pilots, including Alexei Ganev, who you see here with Boris Yeltsin, are some of the most decorated pilots in the world. But they get you up there, and then they turn the controls over to you. Because there's nothing you can do at 80,000 feet, which is going to harm you or the vehicle. And you get to fly around a little bit. And in fact, they tell you, they joke, they say, head for the airport, head for the runway, and you bring yourself in, slowly. And no, head for the runway, and they put you into a vertical dive. We also offer flights on MiG-29 Fulcrums and the MiG-21 and Su-30s and L-39 trainers, all of which offer a different experience. The MiG-29 is an acrobatic vehicle. There's some people who don't want to see the sights. It doesn't go as high, but it takes you just as fast at Mach 2.7, and it does all these acrobatics. In fact, when they bring you in for a landing on that one, they don't let you pilot that one, but when you come down for a landing, they approach the runway and they don't land. You think they're going to land, but they pull into a loop right off the runway and then come back around upside down over the runway. If you didn't have a canopy over your head, you could probably reach out and touch the ground. And it's quite a wild ride. It is, in terms of health restrictions, again, if you can ride a roller coaster, you can ride this.
How much does this cost?
Well, this package is $12,000, and it includes the stay in Russia, and also a tour of Star City, and meeting cosmonauts, and a cultural evening out in Moscow. But the actual flight it'll take you about 2 hours. There's one health exam. Health exam is basically run on a treadmill, and then you go. And you have to train a little bit on the ejection seats, but just walk on the treadmill, as long as you can. But that's about it, and then you go, and you fly. And everyone who comes back from this, Owen Garriott's son, Richard Garriott, came back off of this thing, and he was totally out of breath, and completely he just sat there for a couple of minutes, and then he said, again, I want to go. And so he's actually coming back with Russia, and he's flying in a MiG-25, a MiG-29, and a MiG-21. He wants to experience all of it. And
Which one did you say was the one they used on the low level?
on the low level, MiG-29, 29.
They don't let you fly that one at all?
They don't let you fly that one unless you're a pilot. unless you have some piloting skills. But they let you do other things. They let you control where you go, and they also, how many loops you want to do, how many dives. You're up in the air for about an hour and a half, and it's really just a wild ride. And it is really, it gives you the G-forces and the sights that you'll experience on a space flight. But of course, the last step, and the reason we exist, is to actually fly in space. Space Ventures doesn't develop hardware, as Charlie mentioned earlier. We don't build rockets, and the reason why is because we sat down, we thought about it, and we figured out that yes, you could go ahead and design a rocket out there that could take you, but we could get there quicker if you looked at what rockets were being developed today to deliver satellites into orbit that could be adjusted for space tourism. And we looked at the competitors for the X Prize, and we came out with 5 of them that we really think will make it, and will be able to take people starting in the next 2 years. And so we started taking reservations. And reservation program, we have 72 advanced reservations right now, paid reservations for the first flights. In escrow. It's fully refundable. The cost is, well, it's a $6,000 deposit, and the actual flight is $90,000. And that includes, it includes a 6-day astronaut training program. And this is not a rigorous astronaut training program. This is not even physical. There's no physical aspect to it. What we sat down, we thought, if you're going to fly, you better understand what you're doing. And so it's basically coming into the classroom and learning from the people who designed the rockets, who flew it before, who were former NASA astronauts, what you're going to experience, and learning about weightlessness, learning about what you can see out the window, how to do photography. Although there'll be a full set of automatic cameras that will capture your entire flight. You also get a flight suit, and actually get 2 of them. And
One for a change of underwear.
So let me show you a little bit of, how much time do we have? Okay. I'll wrap this up quickly. Some of the vehicles that we have looked at. Now, you've seen this one here at the conference, the Roton. We've met with Gary Hudson, and we believe that this vehicle, when it's up and flying, will be usable for space tourism. And in fact, Gary's now said that he believes it too, and is starting to look at designing a specific vehicle for space tourism after this one's built. Kelly Space and Technology and their Eclipse Astroliner is another vehicle. This one takes you up. I don't know if you're familiar with this one, but this one takes you up on a tow line on the back of a 747, and then releases you and fires its engines and takes you up into 62 miles and then back down. It's not so much a rocket ride as it is a spaceplane ride, which brings us to the next one, which I know you heard of earlier today, Pioneer Rocket Plane. And each of these we've sat down and we said, look, we understand that you're developing this for satellite reasons, and you're funding it that way, but there's a whole other group out there. And we have 72 people already willing to pay $90,000. And when the first flight occurs, when those 5 or 7 people or 10 people get on that first rocket, take off, it's just going to be a mad rush for the next flight. And NASA studies with the STA have shown that there's a worldwide market for this, and we think that we really can tap it. The other vehicle we're working with is the Ascender, being developed by Bristol Space Planes over in England. But the basic step for Space Adventures was that we live by this motto: the best way to predict the future is to create it yourself. And we have a brochure out there in the hall, but there's been people who've talked for years about trying to predict the future. And Lord Kelvin in 1895 said, "Heavier than air flying machines is impossible." And Thomas Thomas Watson, chairman of IBM in 1943, said, "I think there is a world market for maybe 5 computers." Ken Olsen, president and chairman of Digital Equipment Corporation in 1977, said, "There is no reason anyone would want a computer at home." And Bill Gates in 1981 said, "640K ought to be enough for anybody." So we tend to like the quote from Werner von Braun in 1958. He said, "Don't tell me that man doesn't belong out there. Man belongs wherever he wants to go, and he'll do plenty when he gets there." And that's the philosophy of Space Ventures.
Question?
Yes?
Apart from getting sick, what are the consequences of a 20,000-foot dive or whatever it was on your ears?
Well, NASA astronauts have been training this way for the past 40 years, and I won't tell you that, we do go through training on how to clear your ear passages. It is a pressurized plane. There are some people that we tell the people that if they do have past problems with their ears, this may not be the flight for them. But for the most people, they do not experience much discomfort. They have popping in their ears, but that's about it. They clear their ear passages, and that's it. In fact, NASA, to train people to go on this vehicle, puts them into a hyperbaric chamber and simulates that several times over, much more drastic than what you would ever occur in one of these flights.
When you have a vomit comet or whatever your alternative name for it is available here in the United States, is that going to cut the cost down per person?
The cost right now is $6,000 per person to fly on the 0G flight out of Russia, and we anticipate that will cut down by $2,000 or $3,000 if it's in the United States.
So by the end of this year, it should be in the $3,000 to $4,000.
$3,000 to $4,000 range. Yes.
You mentioned you had 2 debut programs. One was the deep sea hydrothermal vents. Is the U.S. Vomit Comet the other debut program?
Actually, there is another one that we're working on. We've started to work with a company that's providing us with the equivalent of a EMU suit to be able to use underwater, and we're not going to be doing it as neutral buoyancy training, but taking you actually under the water off of a Caribbean resort and actually having you just walk along the bottom on somewhat of a cosmic treasure hunt. We figured the experience of putting on a suit and the experience of learning from astronauts about what it's like there is enough to attract people, but also the fact that after you're done, you can go out and lay on the beach and have a fun time. But that's one of the programs that we are going to debut in the next